Fuck yeah, dude. I just made the world's most powerful vape juice from pure ethanol weed. You know? So, to smoke it, I've constructed not only airtight shit, but also I got a radiation-proof chamber. Alright, yo, let's try this shit. Oh no, this is not good. This is not good. I feel like I'm about to hallucinate one of those fucking shitty video game reviews again. Oh fuck, no, God, please.
Welcome to yet another review of an obscure game that you not only cannot buy through legal means anymore, but that's not even that easy to find and download through other means. This time I have a surreal experience that I've been meaning to play for a long time. Outcry, or how it was originally called, Sublustrum. I really prefer the original name, to be honest. It's a lot more original, mysterious, and fitting to the game. No clue what does the word Outcry have to do with this game. It makes it sound like this game would be one of those generic horror games where you're chased by some jumpscare dude. I'm going to call this game Sublustrum for the rest of the video. Sublustrum is an extremely atmospheric point-and-click adventure that got me really interested by its looks alone. I couldn't resist it just from seeing the screenshots and the brilliant original cover art, which is again so much better than the localizations. If you've ever played one of those old-school first-person point-and-clicks, the gameplay in Sublustrum is fairly standard. You have pre-rendered areas where you can turn 360 degrees and you look for items and solve puzzles. And the way the environment is rendered is a true highlight of this game. Every single scene felt incredibly detailed, grimy, and surreal. The game's engine also allowed for some post-processing effects to be added, so the camera would have dynamic exposure, film grade, and some other things going on that added even more detail to what otherwise might feel like a bit static scenes. The only thing I wasn't a huge fan of visually was the camera's way, but luckily I could just turn that off. I especially liked the first zone of the game, because it just resonated with me so much. It would look like an old Soviet building with those signature ugly two-color wall paints, and it would have that even nastier thing where it's obvious that the building is ancient and all the modern commodities were added later on, so the nice bits of the house like hand-carved doors and such would be overshadowed by the galore of exposed pipes and cables. I used to really hate this kind of thing, as it is objectively ugly, but with time it grew on me. Living in this kind of building sucks, but the look is great for something horror-esque and industrial, which I'm totally into. On top of such grimy reality, the first chapter also adds a ton, or several actually, of odd industrial contraptions, which make the features that would normally ruin the look of the building into the main highlight. Unbelievable machines covered in dust in a regular apartment block. I could drool about this for a while. When it comes to the gameplay, there are some similarities to Leggy, or even more to a game that I played through and have recorded but decided not to review, Humorjack's Ring. The biggest similarities between Humorjack's Ring and Sublustrum were the fairly convoluted and not always intuitive puzzles, and just the way the games made me feel after playing them. There is quite a difference between them though. Humorjack's Ring was a FMV game, and most of its fun came from the characters' acting and the little quirks, like a kid flipping the main character off, or this dude that's always nude in a pool that I constantly have to visit. The rest of the game felt quite mundane though, almost like a virtual tourist guide or something. Sublustrum was the opposite in that regard. It felt anything but mundane. But it felt like there wasn't much to grab onto, since there are pretty much no characters in the game. Anyway, I feel like getting into the spoiler section early this time, because I feel like even showing the environments in the further chapters is a bit of a spoiler. So I'll cover the story now, so won't have to shy away from showing some stuff later. But if not hearing the crucial parts is enough to you, you can skip to here. The game begins with a FMV intro. It is a narrated letter of invitation from one brother to another. One of them, the scientist, has invented something unbelievable and is inviting his brother, the writer, to come as urgently as possible, without giving many details except for the fact that it might give a lot of inspiration for a book. Upon the writer's arrival, the scientist's neighbor informs the writer that his brother has just passed away and hands him the keys. That reminds me a bit of Path Logic's beginning. That's where the actual game starts. The great majority of the story is told through various notes scattered throughout the game, and that's likely the way of storytelling I like the least in video games. At least quite a few of them are voiced. Well, too. Through a phonograph record, the writer is told by his brother to preserve the machines he invented, but not let anyone know about them, and most importantly, not to use them. That would make quite a lot of sense, since the scientist's brother ended up dead. But of course the only thing there is to do in the game is try to reverse engineer the logic of how the contraptions work through the scattered notes and use them. Or I guess I could just turn off the game, but where's the fun in that? During the investigation, the player learns that the scientist's brother was investigating some reality-bending stuff, not believing that the real reality can be this linear, supporting his claims through recorded mysterious disappearances of ancient tribes and such. After figuring out some nasty puzzles, the player can use the forbidden machine himself to transport to a different dimension called the Shimmering World, where everything is distorted and time flows different. Visually, it's wonderful. It reminds me quite a bit of the environments in the Void, with the floating isles, messed up gravity, and the surreal Soviet ruins. It gradually becomes apparent that the scientist had gotten stuck in this dimension and has been slowly going mad. He tells that every trip to the Shimmering World also takes a part of a person's essence to itself, imbues itself with memories. Eventually, while exploring, I get to see some visions of two kids, presumably the brothers in their childhood, and the first vision is straight up them beating a random dog to death for no reason, and the whole vision comes out of nowhere. Why the fuck is any of this happening, and how the hell do I slap a shadow into oblivion? Since time is non-linear, I have to solve a puzzle to change this event and turn on an alarm. Then, instead of beating the dog, the kids try to escape through a secret hatch in the furnace. Excuse me, what? I really hope they would get stuck there and get burned by the workers. Yes. Why the heck would you crawl inside an industrial furnace? Unfortunately, they survive. I follow them and get to this desert location, which doesn't have much to do with anything, but it has the only character that's not in a cutscene. This random translucent ghost dude that just tells me I won't find my brother here anymore. After some more frustrating puzzles, I get to ride a rail car in a pretty neat cutscene. Yet, I don't seem to be inside the car in it. Then I get to the last chapter, where instead of the usual scientist's journal entries, I start getting childish diary notes. The further I go into the Shimmering World, the further I seem to see into the scientist's past. The whole last chapter is a one big sound-based puzzle, and at the end of it I get into a short winter zone where one of the brothers is shown falling into a frozen lake and drowning. The end. Not much is explained, and a lot is left for interpretation, but some of the more reasonable explanations would be that the writer brother, the protagonist, was the one who had died, and the scientist was trying to move into this non-linear world to go to the past and save the writer brother. Note saying the writer brother never went to school would also support this in a sort of a suppressed bad memory way. The notes also never seem to recognize the death of one of the brothers. It could also be that the scientist had sacrificed himself to bring the writer back to life. Switch places in a way. Except that the writer ended up being a colossal moron, and despite any warnings got into the Shimmeric world too, where he'll likely be stuck and dead too. Welcome back, all who skipped through, and those who were listening, I could say that the plot actually felt quite underwhelming. Point-and-click games tend to not be the most engaging when it comes to gameplay, and their best shot at being memorable is the story. But it was not that great. It might have sounded intriguing enough, but that's because I summed it all up in a quick manner. Within the game itself, it would actually feel almost non-existent and very vague. There are pretty much no characters to latch onto, and the few there aren't characterized well whatsoever. In turn, there's not much driving force to the story. On top of that, the game is super short. It can take an enormous amount of time if you're trying to beat it on your own, because I'd say the puzzles were genuinely difficult and often unintuitive. But when knowing what to do, or referring to a walkthrough, the game can be finished in under 2 hours. There's not that much story that can be jammed into such an amount of time, even if it wasn't scarce. It might sound like I'm slamming the game hard now, and I was actually not sure if I wanted to make a review at all because of this, but there's a saving grace of sorts. Upon reading more about it, I found out that Sublustrum began as an interactive visual music album based on Atmosperic's music. Atmosperic makes some pretty neat dark ambient music with bits of industrial and neoclassical. In this audience, they might be best known for scoring Metro 2033. I'm a big fan of audio-visual experiences and taking music beyond just sound. In this case, it makes a lot more sense that Sublustrum is an audio-visual experience first, and the story is almost like an afterthought. The game is incredibly surreal, even if it takes a spin on some semi-scientific theories. The presentation side of the game is phenomenal. The game was originally released in 2008, and by then pre-rendered graphics were already mostly forgotten in favor of full 3D, but I absolutely adore them here. I already like pre-rendered stuff in old games. Because of the lower resolution, it somehow seems to make the visuals more believable and gritty, unlike the super smooth 3D rendered models, but I was almost surprised just how well pre-rendered graphics work with more modern technologies. I had gotten used to the low resolutions, believing that it helps hide the flaws, but Sublustrum looks absolutely brilliant. There might not be that many different environments, but every single one would be incredibly detailed, and it would look like I could feel the texture of every single surface, and could wipe the thick layer of dust from just about anything. It has the right amount of realism, both visually and technically, to be immersive and believable, and also of craziness, which makes me want to take in every single scene. The sound that goes along with the game is great too. The soundtrack, while playing an important part, didn't feel intrusive. Not sure if it's something I'd listen to on its own, but it added a lot to the game. The sound effects were also done nicely and fit the grimy world perfectly. I haven't heard the original Russian voiceover, but the English actor of the professor sounded great. The other actors were meh though, especially the kids. There would only be some technical flaws where the voiceover would stop at the wrong parts when reading a journal entry. Coming back to the gameplay, since I'm more comfortable showing more than just the first chapter now, I want to still touch upon the puzzles a bit. At this point and clicks, goddammit, are infamous for being difficult due to its puzzles having weird logic that might be hard to get into, and quite often these games are incredibly difficult to beat without a guide. It's the same with Sublustrum. I guess it's not quite pixel hunting with the high resolution, but some items would be hard to find due to them blending into the environment well and generally not knowing what you might need. For example, could you tell where I need to click here? I would have missed this on my own. Fortunately, there were a bit less item-based puzzles and no item combining, which is often quite cursed, in favor of different puzzles. Except that the other puzzles were hard to understand or at the very least tedious. Usually you would expect to know what you need to do and then try to find a solution. In Sublustrum, it often felt like even finding what to do is the bigger part of the puzzle. Often you would have to do random things, pressing random buttons, flipping random switches, and trying to figure out what do they even affect, and then going back and forth to fix things. I very much prefer the other way. It feels so much more natural, for example, to know there's an item I need in a locked box and trying to figure out a way how to open it, rather than doing random things, opening a random box for no reason, to find a random item in it and then having to figure out why I needed any of that. Sure, I might be hyperbolizing a bit, but that's how it felt. There would be some quirks that would put me out of the flow. For example, the puzzles with reversing time being timed. God damn it again. I would need to go back in time to do something, but then I couldn't go back to the original time manually and would have to just wait doing nothing. I have also managed to soft lock myself. You see, quite a few books and notes get added to the inventory, but not all of them. One of them had a separate map attached that I needed in order to find an item, but I accidentally closed the note instead of turning to the next page. The note wasn't added to my inventory and disappeared from the game world, so the map was lost forever too. I could have just went to the location where the needed item is hidden, but I couldn't click on the hotspot to dig it up. I would need to have the map in my inventory. Some puzzles, even after figuring out the way to do them, I didn't want to do on my own since they just felt too tedious, making me guess things based on trial and error and having to go back and forth a lot. Some of the puzzles would be sound-based, which I personally don't mind too much, but if you're tone deaf, or even worse, completely deaf, you straight up cannot beat the game. Due to all the frustration, it is a bit hard to recommend Sublustrum. On one hand, it feels like an amazing audio-visual experience. I would love to carefully examine every little scene, but the lagging plot and the puzzle difficulty were quite off-putting. At least the game isn't too long, so it isn't a torture, but it also doesn't feel rewarding, unless you have a lot of time to waste and actually enjoy weird puzzles. I personally expected more story beats in this game, especially since it's sort of presented as a thriller. It didn't feel as such. But hey, the guy behind Atmosperic has actually bought the rights to the game and is planning to remake it with updated graphics, widescreen support, and who knows what other stuff. A hint system could be nice. There hasn't been any new info after the several-year-old initial post, but Sublustrum may one day become available again and better than ever. I hope that day comes, and I can recommend the game more then. That's it for now. Thank you for bearing with me, and see you in another video.
Oh, fuck. Oh, my head. Oh, shit. I'm never smoking that shit again. Oh, fuck. Help me, God. Oh, God.